Hello and welcome to GSF Podcasts, sponsored by the Gary Sinise Foundation's Education and Outreach Initiative, aiming to educate the public on the importance of serving America's veterans, first responders, and their families.
Welcome to the Gary Sinise Foundation podcast. I'm your host, Cristin Snyder, and today I have U.S. Army Ranger Sergeant First Class Mike Schlitz in the studio with me. Mike served for 14 years in the U.S. Army, taking on various roles from rifleman to platoon sergeant. In February 2007, he was medically retired after sustaining severe combat injuries. But instead of letting his challenges define him, Mike turned his experience into a personal mission, advocating for and supporting his fellow service members, their families, and the families of our fallen. He is a Gary Sinise Foundation Ambassador and a specially adapted Smart Home recipient, and his resilience and dedication to service are truly inspiring. Welcome, Mike.
Oh, thank you.
I'm so excited for this. Okay.
Oh, I've been waiting for this.
I know. You've been the one where I'm like, okay, let's do this. Okay, so let's just jump right in. This podcast is in honor of Mac, Gary's son, who we lost in January of 2024. And you actually had a wonderful relationship with Mac. Can you share about that?
Yeah, I think back to, when I was coming out to the office in California, and getting to see Mac out there. And I, like I do every time I visit the office, I make my rounds and always get a, visit with each individual person. And I can always remember, swinging into Mac's office or when he was out of the cubicle and spending a little extra time hearing about his music, and the things that he had going on just outside of the office.
Right.
And then getting to do some events with him. And then I remember when he was diagnosed and, having him in the hospital, and I can remember calling him, and having some conversations with him when he was in the hospital initially and just trying to be there for him too, support-wise, as somebody who's spent quite a bit of time in the hospital. So that was very hard. And, that's why being on this podcast was so important, is to help honor that memory and my time that I got to share with him.
Yeah, you were very special to him.
Well, he was special to all of us.
Yeah, all of us, exactly. So can you share actually also, how did you meet Gary?
So a friend of mine, Sergeant Major Jeff Millinger, who Gary has known for a long time, knew I was going to be out in California having surgery when I was doing the facial reconstruction. And he called up Leanne Tweeden, who also mutual friend of Gary. Yep. And so she was picking my mother and I up to do lunch. And she's like, oh, before we go to lunch, I have a little surprise, and obviously ended up on the set of CSI. Yeah. But we didn't really know that. So we're walking through, and of course she knocked on this random trailer, and out comes Gary. And I can remember he was in character. So, as Detective Mac Taylor, had the badge, the gun, the whole bit on. And obviously, like anybody else, I'm like, holy F, it's Lieutenant Dan. That's
I had the same reaction.
The minute, I think most of us have that reaction when you first meet him.
Exactly.
And it was very surreal moment, going into the trailer, getting to spend some time with him before filming, watching him film one of the scenes. And then, he stopped everything and gave us the hand-guided tour through the entire set. And then going back to the trailer and getting to spend some more time. And then, we just exchanged information. And, when you meet somebody like that, you just treat them like a person. You treat them like you would anybody else, but we just had this instant connection. We just stayed in contact after that. And I was already heavily involved in veteran advocacy at that time. And we kept bumping into each other at different events. And so he's like, when are you going to come and be part of my organization? I'm like, when you ask.
Oh.
And of course, the very next day he called me.
Shocking.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome.
So, so it was a great moment and something I'll reflect on quite a bit.
Yeah, I love that. I often hear from people that, like from our veterans and service members, that they'll exchange contact information with Gary and they'll be like, am I really going to hear from him? And sure enough, it's like the next day.
Yes. And I don't know how he does it, how he has enough time.
I've heard, yeah.
To keep in touch with all of us.
Oh, yeah. All the time. His relationship, he is an expert at that, just keeping those relationships strong. So let's take it back a little bit. Why did you join the Army?
I think it's especially for young teenage boys, that are very, very rebellious. I think it's a common thing. I was way too immature to think about college. I knew if I went to college right after school, I would have failed. I would have been more worried about partying and the good times.
And you knew that while you were not
Yeah, I knew I wasn't going to do well. I knew that wasn't my focus. And honestly, I just didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up.
Yeah.
And so I was like, my brother had first off, my grandfather was kind of a World War II era Navy veteran. And then there was a long gap where there was no military. Okay. My uncles were all just a little bit too young for Vietnam. So we didn't grow up around that. And Grandpa didn't talk a whole lot about it. You can get a little snippet here and there. And then my older brother went into the Army a couple of years before me. And that was my first introduction to going into the Army. So I'm like, if he can do it, I can do it kind of thing. There's a little bit of that, brotherly competition. And so I was like, well, I could do 3 years, get the GI Bill, and go to school afterwards and maybe have an idea what I want to do. But I tell you, man, I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the routine of everything, the challenges of everything, both as an individual and again, later as a leader. To the point where I didn't want to leave.
Of course. Yeah, that's amazing. And so then why then what inspired you to become a Ranger?
Well, I think that's the next step of challenging yourself. Can I do it? Can I show the mental fortitude to carry on when I'm tired, when I'm hungry, when things aren't quite going the way I want it to go? And so I view that in everything. Like if there's a challenge, I want to see if I can tackle it.
Yeah. There is no doubt that still remains strong.
Yeah, and I think, especially with the injury and trying to find new ways to adapt to things, I think that's helped me along and throughout my recovery, thinking back to those days.
Oh, yeah. It's kind of the foundation of who you are.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you were deployed to a particularly dangerous area in Iraq. What was it like, experiencing that? But was it like you expected?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So I grew up on all these great movies, Hamburger Hill, Platoon, all the Vietnam and World War II movies. And so I think I had built combat up to this grand thing in my head where I thought from the time I wake up to the time I go to sleep, I'm just going to be in a firefight. And it wasn't quite like that. You have skirmishes, you have things you're doing, you're always kind of on edge, but it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. But obviously it wasn't pleasant.
Yeah, exactly.
So I was deployed in the area that they call the Sunni Triangle, which the media had called it the Triangle of Death.
Yep, exactly.
And the reason why it was so deadly wasn't just the conflict that we were engaging with, the insurgency and everything. It was the Sunni on Shiite sectarian violence. So a lot of the times the things that we were responding to wasn't even targeted at us. So to give an example of that, I can remember doing we had rolled in Humvees, dismounted, and was going through this area. And there had been reports of a V-bid in the area, and we were kind of keeping an eye out for it, a vehicle-borne IED. And nothing really looked off off kilter of us, and the vehicles had moved around to the far side of the town and picked us up, and we were moving out, and the minute we were like 2 minutes away, kaboom. And it shook our vehicles, the ground, there was dust all in the area, and they had basically took that vehicle and did one of the Sunni mosques.
Oh.
So that, I'm like, there's no way they didn't know, and they drove it in, so like it wasn't there when we were going through, but they could have easily done that while we were in town. Like they knew we were there, but they actually waited till we were out, because obviously what happens if they do that while we're there? The U.S. response to that's going to be greater.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that we weren't there and they were doing it, now we're just going to kind of secure the area versus going in heavy.
Right.
And I have a unique, because after I was injured, I had gone back to Iraq a couple of times on trips.
Mm-hmm.
And people always ask me, like, because if you look at Iraq as far as a pyramid, when we first went in, we didn't take a lot of casualties. We didn't take a lot of killed in actions. We were kind of laying waste and setting the tone, but like any good enemy, they're studying you just like we studied them, and they found out some of our weaknesses, and that was our vehicles. And so obviously our casualties and our killed in actions had all started kind of doubling. So the U.S. response to that was to triple the number of boots on the ground and do a big sweep across the country. Well, when you have that many people in country, obviously your numbers are going to go up.
Exactly.
So if you look at that late 05 going into kind of like maybe early 08, there was 3 times more casualties and killed in actions than any other point in time in Iraq. So that's kind of the kind of the peak of the combat time in Iraq, and then it kind of slowly started going down from there.
Yeah. What inspired you to go back?
I just was curious, honestly.
Okay.
An opportunity presented itself on this program called Operation Proper Exit, where they're taking wounded guys back to Iraq to see where they got injured.
Okay.
Because their mindset was, when you get pulled out on a stretcher, or you're toured in the way you wanted to. You didn't get to walk out on your own. So they were taking you back to kind of, kind of gain some healing, from it.
I was going to ask, was it?
But it was more than that, because what they would do is we travel the country and we'd go to these different bases, and they would fill these, cafeterias up with people, or town hall meetings, and the wounded people on the trip would actually get to share their stories with those in country and give advice. And, if God forbid, you got hurt, this is kind of what you can expect, kind of thing. So not just seeing where you got injured, but also getting to kind of mentor the people that were over there.
Back.
And so I did that the first time in December of 09.
Oh, wow.
And then I went back twice in 2010 before the withdrawal.
Oh, wow. Wow. So can you take us back to the day you were injured?
Yeah, and it's great that we're doing this right now, because, this week it'll be 18 years for me.
It's the anniversary.
It's coming up quick. So, it was 27 February 2007. The first part of my deployment, we were strictly on the ground, looking for those caches, IEDs, setting up battle positions. But my sister platoon was attached to an engineering unit, and their job was to drive around and look for those roadside bombs, those IEDs.
Yep.
And we realized that their young ones weren't getting the infantry experience. So the decision was made, their platoon and my platoon would flip-flop. And we would take over their mission, they'd come out to my area. And so it's not a mission I wanted.
Okay, how did you feel?
I was very boisterous about not wanting to be in a vehicle.
Got it.
I always call it, I don't like driving around in a tuna can.
Yeah.
And obviously we had better vehicles than that. We had these huge up-armored MRABs with V-hulls, so that when the rounds would come up, they kind of would shatter out. But again, being there at the height of the war, and driving around day in and day out, our vehicles were just getting hammered. And unfortunately, the mechanics couldn't keep up with those vehicles and the maintenance on it. So I was short a vehicle. And so I had to make the decision to take my commander's Humvee, which doesn't have the armor that my other vehicles had. And, we had to run patrols like that until we could get it up and running. So 27 February 2007, we started like any other day. We called everybody in, gave them mission briefs, went through our rehearsals, and we rolled out, just before daylight. And so we were about 2 hours into that, what was going to be about a 15-hour patrol. And I can remember the sun coming up. We had just cleared this dead-end road. We had turned our vehicles around. We're coming back up, and I heard the boom. And before I could even say a choice 4-letter word, as we'll call it, I can remember hitting the ground.
Oh my God.
And the minute I hit the ground, I knew we had been ambushed, and an ambush, for those that don't really know, is just a surprise attack. And in training, the thing that you always want to do is kind of just take a split second and get a battle damage assessment.
Totally.
Where did it come from? What just happened? And where do I need to go? And so for me, I looked at my vehicle, and I really didn't see anything out of the ordinary. But what I didn't see was my guys. So I just instantly got up and started running for the vehicle. And unfortunately, before I got to the vehicle, I could feel the flames hitting me in the face. And, I can remember, like, I wanted to get the majority of the fire off. So I dropped my body armor. I went ahead and dropped the body armor. And then, just like they teach you in school, drop and roll, drop and roll.
Yep.
And I rolled until I couldn't roll no more. And basically, not knowing at the time, but there was propane involved in the attack. So every time I'd roll, it'd just reignite. And it got to the point where my muscles just kind of locked up on me, and I was face down in the dirt. And what I always tell people is, at that moment, there's no way to really explain in words what it's like to be on fire. Yeah. The pure agony of it, it just doesn't, I haven't found a way to really express that true pain. So I was like, this is it. I'm going to die here in Iraq, face down in the dirt. About the time I could kind of have those feelings, I could hear my guys from the other vehicle starting to yell at me. So I knew my guys were coming, but I was like, what are they going to be able to do for me? And then they hit me with a fire extinguisher. And two things kind of came over my body at that moment. The first is the physical release. Like, it was like somebody put an ice blanket on me. It felt great. I mean, it was just like a immediate release of pain. And then you have the emotional side. Okay, my guys are here. They're taking care of me. Now I have a fighting chance. Yeah. So I remember all that. Like, I can remember. You
were conscious through the whole thing.
Yeah. And actually, even when they were running up, my counterpart on the patrol, Matt Bailey, he was like, roll. And I'm like, no duh. And he still tells that story. Like, he's like, dude, his brain was still like, no duh.
Wait, you said that?
Yeah. And so there was, there's still some humor
so it's
involved
still you.
in it.
Yeah, we can see that it's you, and and look back on it.
The guys were on it, but my role, didn't stop as a leader. So the minute they put me out, and they're putting me on a spine board, and I'm still, all right, we got to set up the HLZ, we got to get security up. And I'm like, boom, 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 boom. But even if I didn't do that, they were already doing it. We had trained and we had rehearsed for this scenario. We knew the succession in command. They knew who had to step up and take my position. And all that was being done. So even if I couldn't have done that and I wouldn't have been conscious, all that would have been handled. And then they got me away from everything, because obviously we had spare rounds in the back of the vehicle, and they were starting to kind of pop off, cook off. So it was important to get me away from there. And I can remember the medevac coming in and flying in.
You're still conscious.
Yeah. And especially Keelan, who was our combat lifesaver, EMT, he had run over because unfortunately in my vehicle, my medic had passed. So he was running over and he kneeled down on me. And actually on me.
On you?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
And I'm like, hey man, first step is not to injure the patient any further, so I'm already giving him a hard time,
You're busting his job. I mean, obviously he needed it at the time, but.
I mean, it was purely a mistake,
I know.
And there's still humor in that too, because I can remember him tapping me in the midsection and giving me the thumbs up, okay, because that's what every guy wants to know. And then,
I just got that. Sorry, that took me a second. I was like, wait. Midsection. What are you talking? Got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You
That's
know,
a
there
thing.
might be kids watching this.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to go. I mean, I could go into detail, but we'll pass on that one.
Okay. Got it.
But when as the bird was coming down, obviously you have all the water wash, so all the guys, covered me up with their bodies to make sure, it didn't affect me, and I can remember being loaded in a medevac, and the flight medic, who was a female flight medic, I can see her face, and one of the few people I haven't got to meet along my journey, but her asking my name and social, and I don't know how much I got out. I just hit me with the morphine, and really that's almost my last memory for 4 months.
Oh my God.
I have one recollection, and I don't know if it was in the green zone in Baghdad, or if it was Landstuhl, Germany, where I had to go second and then on to Brooke Army Medical Center in San Antonio. But at one of those stops, I can remember being carted off some kind of aircraft and the people around me moving me to a building. And I can remember looking up at them, and that's it. So that's my only recollection until I was kind of starting to come out of my medically induced coma.
So they put you in a medically for 4 months.
Yeah, because of with the burns, the process for the debriding, that taking all the dead skin off and doing everything, which is a very painful thing. They really don't want you fully conscious for that, because even when I was starting to kind of come out of it, and there was still debriding that had to be done, and skin grafts, and it's brutal. I mean, it's not pleasant. So I'm so thankful that they did that for me. Some people would rather remember that just because they don't want that lapse of time.
Oh, right.
And the way,
like the disassociation, yeah.
So I've talked to combat wounded that weren't conscious during their injury, and they woke up in the hospital. So they don't remember how they got hurt or what happened on the ground. I at least have that. So I understand from that point of view, not wanting to miss that time.
Totally.
But I'm thankful I missed that time.
Yeah. So you're in the medical coma for 4 months, and then do you wake up, or how did you then come to know that this is your surroundings? What were those early days like?
Yeah. Obviously, I was sleeping a lot, so I had no sense of real time.
Okay.
So, my brother and my mother had come down and were bedside.
Yeah.
And every time I'd wake up, they'd always ask me, like, all right, Michael, where are you? And, because they want you to bring you back to reality. And I'm like, Texas hospital, and then some parts of my brain was still in combat. And so we always joke, because obviously the stuff I was doing in Iraq and being a leader and sending guys out on patrols or being part of patrols, or writing, op orders for it, I would try to send my brother and my mother out on missions.
No.
And I'm like, all right, so I need you to go down the hallway and start clearing rooms. And
Get out.
And so they would
you'd wake up and have a mission in mind?
Yeah, and so they would be like, Michael, where are you? Texas hospital. All right, now here's what you're going to be doing, right?
Get out. Oh,
so I kind of knew, but I didn't know.
Right. It's just foggy.
Yeah, and then, when they're bringing you out of it, you're still heavily drugged. They're just backing off how much drugs you're on. And so you're still hallucinating. You're still seeing the funny little characters.
Yeah. Funny characters?
Yeah,
you're seeing things too?
Yeah, there was a leprechaun one time. I don't know if it's the Irish background in my life or whatever, but I mean, who doesn't want to see a leprechaun? Kangaroo.
No.
Yeah, I mean, just weird stuff. And you have this altered kind of reality.
Oh my goodness.
I thought I was somehow transported to the future. And that one makes sense to me because everybody who had to come in my room had to wear the yellow robes, the blue gloves, the face mask. I'm man, what kind of outfits are these?
Have I been out?
Yeah, so it's just very trippy when you're coming out of that. And then, you have the other part of reality is, they coming to terms with your injury. I really didn't know how bad I was injured.
Okay.
So mom was always letting me know, hey, you don't have hands anymore.
Oh, so she was telling you.
But I couldn't, because of my vision, and I had to wear these specially adapted goggles that really didn't allow me to see. I couldn't see my hands. But when you talk about phantom sensations, I feel like I still have hands. So my mind was saying, no, you got hands. I can feel it. I'm touching my thumb right now. How can I not have hands? So
it's that real.
Yeah. So even right now, as we sit here, I still feel like I have hands. So if I didn't, have the prosthetics or whatever,
Right.
or blind, I would still feel like I have hands.
Mm-hmm. Oh my!
So that was something very hard for me to come to terms with until I got a little bit further down my recovery, where I was like, oh yeah, I don't have hands.
So was it as you saw it, or was it maybe as you understood it? Did you have to see it?
I had to see it.
You had to see it.
Yeah.
Okay. And how long did that take?
Oh, months.
Really?
Yeah, and honestly, even the burns, I didn't fully know the extent of my burns. I mean, obviously, I remember having to learn how to walk again, and that, because, I was like 165 pounds when I got blown up, and then in ICU, I was like 114. So obviously, there was a lot of muscle damage and stuff. So in my mind, you think you're just going to jump out of bed and start walking, but the real reality of it is, all I could do was like have support just to stand up. So today's, physical therapy would just be get me standing, or hey, now we're going to take 2 steps, or now we're going to walk to the door, and they increase that as time goes on.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that part I knew I was damaged, but the one thing they don't allow, no mirrors.
Interesting.
So I had no idea what I looked like, and I was actually, I don't think I saw myself in a mirror for the first time until like maybe month 14, post exposure, about 14 months before I saw myself in a mirror for the first time.
Over a year, 14. Yeah. That's the first time.
Yeah.
What? Did you even question? Did you question not seeing, or did you just kind of come to terms with it?
I mean, I never really thought about it. I just knew I was injured, and I really didn't. It didn't cross my mind to go look in the mirror. There just was never any mirrors.
There's nothing there.
In the hospital, and then, at that time I was in a wheelchair. I was head to toe bandages. It's not like I could just jump out of my wheelchair and go over. Even when I had on-post housing. It wasn't until like around month 14, I remember Mom had gone to the grocery store to get some food. And at that time I could move around a little bit. And so I purposely at that point had gone into the bathroom to go look, and my jaw hit the floor. I just couldn't believe it was that bad. So, and so I can understand why in the hospital they don't want you to have to endure that right away. Because it is something that mentally you kind of struggle with a little bit.
Going through something so life-altering as your injuries, what kept you going through your toughest moments in your early recovery?
There's always the point, within the Rangers, you just, there's no quit.
Okay.
You can't quit.
Totally.
And then I always wanted to lead from the front, so I didn't want to fail my guys. And I had a very great experience through an organization, Veterans Airlift Command, that used to donate planes and fly the combat wounded that couldn't fly commercially. And I remember somebody coming in my room when I was still in the hospital, shortly before I was being released. But they're like, "What can we do for you?" I'm like, "I want to go to my welcome home ceremony. I want to see my guys come home from Iraq." And they're like, "Yeah, that's probably not going to happen."
How soon was it?
So that would have been November of 2007. So you're talking not quite 9 months.
Oh yeah.
And again, still head to toe bandages and not walking yet. I'm like, I don't care how it happens. I want to be there. So all these entities came together to make it happen. Veterans Airlift Command found a pilot to bring his plane in. And actually, the first plane they brought in, they realized they're not going to be able to get me into that one. So that guy flew home and got a different plane brought that one in. And they made a special ramp so they could get me into it. And so it was Mom, me, and the medical team that flew with me up to Fort Drum, New York, so I could see my guys come home. And they got me a hotel room. I still had to do my daily physical therapy. So even though I was there, it was still very
right, good.
But when I was there, we had gone to the NCO club and threw a little get together with my closer friends, and they knew at that time I was starting to take steps. But I had already had physical therapy. It had been a long day, and I can remember my buddies were like, "Oh, we want you to walk," and I just didn't have it in me. I didn't have the energy. I didn't have the strength, and that was like very hard for me because I'm like, never did I ever want anybody to see me that weak. So I took that as a failure. So that was like a step or kind of a kick in the butt for me to be like, all right, next time they see me, I will be in shape. Like,
give you a goal.
So it motivated me to walk. It kind of got me in the idea that I want to jog again. And so it kind of was the kick in the butt I needed to kind of take that next step.
What was it like seeing them all?
Those are your family, and these are some of those guys I knew from other units. Then we were just all having to be up there at the same time. A lot of them were the guys I was in charge of. So it was very important for me to see them and let them know I was still alive.
Exactly. You're still you.
They were all kind of getting updates about where I was, but I was always so hitting touch and go, and like everybody was pretty much telling me, like, you guys just got to plan that he's not going to make it.
Oh man. So they were telling people, like preparing them.
Oh, they're even telling Mom. Like, Mom was told multiple times when I was in the hospital, like, you probably should start planning his funeral.
No.
And Mom just never gave up. She's like, no, I won't until he's gone. So.
How important was that?
What's that?
Like having that support and that kind of anchor and strength.
I couldn't have done it without. Without her, without my brothers. Because in some way, I remember one time even within the physical therapy and learning to walk again, one day I was just having a bad day. I just didn't want to do it. It's not that I didn't have the energy to do it, I just didn't want to do it. And so Mom kind of dug in my ass a little bit and in a not so nice way motivated me to go and finish my physical therapy.
Sometimes you need a little bit of that, a little fight, a little boost, come on,
Right.
Yeah.
So there's been moments throughout the time that, you can find ways to kind of keep pushing forward, and you can find inspiration anywhere. You just have to look for it.
Okay, because I was going to ask for our listeners who are on their own recovery journey, or if they're either in it or about to embark on their own recovery journey, is there something that you wish someone had told you that you can share with them?
That's such a hard question sometimes because
everybody's different.
And there's different variables and where you're at in your recovery. What point are you in grief, anger? Because you're going to have all that. I even on my own part, battled with suicide. Where from the time I woke up to the time I went to sleep, all I could think about was killing myself. I couldn't walk at the time. I was head to toe bandages. I couldn't take myself to the bathroom. I couldn't feed myself. I couldn't do anything. And for somebody who couldn't do any of those things, I still figured out ways I could have killed myself. I could have easily done it. I just needed the opportunity to do it. But the thing I had was I was always surrounded by somebody. I was never left alone. I had a great support network. So I think that's important. But then some of it is your own kind of being proactive in your own self-care and your advocacy of moving forward and coming to terms. So obviously in my attack, I lost my driver, Corporal Henry. I lost my gunner, Sergeant Susanka. I lost my medic, Sergeant Cadavero. And so on top of my injuries, I also had to deal with the loss of my guys. And one of the biggest things that you'll hear about is survivor's guilt.
Exactly.
I refuse to call it that. I refuse to have survivor's guilt. I say I have survivor's pride. I'm proud that I got to serve with them. I'm proud of the men they were, the choices they made. I have more to be proud about in remembering them than having the guilt.
Yeah.
And so when I live my life, I will always do stuff to kind of help carry their legacy on and say their name and tell their story. So you just have to find within your own recovery what works for you. But the one thing you cannot do is do it by yourself. If you try doing it by yourself and you isolate, bad things are probably going to happen if you try to do it on your own.
How long were you in the hospital for?
So I was in all in the hospital for 10 months, 6 months ICU, and then 4 months in the step-down burn ward. And then I was released December, because it was a couple days before Christmas. And I was able to have a small on-post house. but I still did 2 more years of outpatient therapy and surgery.
So near the hospital.
So I had to be close. I wasn't allowed to go out yet for the first year. And it was still Monday through Friday, like clockwork, going into the hospital and doing stuff, having more surgeries, having a recovery, doing physical therapy, doing occupational therapy. So even though I wasn't in the hospital, it was still, that was my duty position, was to go do those things.
Oh my goodness. How many surgeries?
It's tough because I retired in March of 2010, but that's when I went out to California to start my facial reconstruction and do the eye work and do stuff like that. So I think when I retired in 2010, I was right around 60-some surgeries in that 3-year process. And then November of last year, I just had my 100th surgery. So I'm finally triple digits.
Oh my gosh, that is
I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, man, I think they always told me at 100, man, you get steak knives. So I'm like, what?
No, get out. Oh my goodness, bless you. Okay, what were the early days like for you at home? Like I guess it would be not in the hospital.
Those were tough days.
They were. Okay.
Because still there was a lot of wound care.
Yeah.
We had home health that would come in, but there was still a lot Mom had to do. And I always, give it to the caregivers because they do not get enough credit.
Totally.
They don't get sleep. They don't eat right. They don't get to take care of themselves. They always say, you got to take care of yourselves or you can't take care of others. But that's not the easiest thing to do when you're actually in that situation. So Mom was, I saw the toll it was taking on her. It was bad. And then obviously I was going through my own things. And so there was some verbal arguments, or there was some fighting back and forth, and so it was tough. It wasn't easy on her or nor me, but especially on her.
Man, you volunteered to serve your country, our country, to protect and defend our way of life, to protect our freedoms. And did that mission change following the injury?
I think so.
Yeah.
It's funny to me because I talk to so many people and everybody has a different reason why they join the service.
Yes.
Patriotism, maybe it's a generational thing, their whole family serves. Everybody has their reason. And mine was purely selfish. Like, I just didn't want to go to college and I didn't want to work a factory job. So for me, it was just, I'm just going to go do that. So in the military, it's funny to me because we talk a lot about teamwork and there's no I in team, but there absolutely is. If you look inside the A, there's a line and a dot, right? So if you want to go to schools or you want to take that next step, there's a lot of self-individual things you have to do. You got to outwork, your other guys so you can perform better and get selected to go to schools or, do different assignments or get promoted. So a lot of that, like everything about my life was always about me. Very little about anybody else. And I took care of the people under me, obviously, because those are my guys, those are my family.
Yeah.
But outside of work, like I didn't really take a notice. I can tell you now, post-injury, post-retirement, I still keep in touch with those guys. I am probably a better leader to them now than I was when I was in the service, because I don't have to worry about me. And even everything I've chose to do post-military has been about others because my needs are met. I don't have to worry about how I'm going to pay my next bill or, anything like that. So I can focus on others now. But in the military, it wouldn't have been that way. So I did a 180 post-injury.
I will tell you that you and just the way that you live your life and how you just take on the world, that is something that I know, especially for Mac, that was just so inspiring to him, especially as he was in his own health challenges. And he would say, and Gary has shared it too, that it was our severely wounded heroes, especially you, who just deeply inspired him as he was just on his own journey. And I just know that, you do that for all of us. all of us, myself included. So, well, you often speak about the importance of mental health, and you've spoken about it here about how just having the support of others. But do you have any advice, or what would you say to a veteran or a first responder who is struggling with mental and emotional challenges that is maybe reluctant and sometimes unwilling to seek help or to ask for help?
The unwilling part's tough.
It is.
Because if you don't want help, you're not going to get help. It doesn't matter. I mean, you can be a family member trying to get that veteran to go get help, but if they don't want it, they're not going to. It's not time.
Okay.
They got to find their time where something in their life leads them to say, okay, I need a change.
Got it.
You can support them, you can mention it, but until they're ready to take that step, they're not going to take that step. Hopefully, something you can say or do will inspire them to take that next step. But ultimately, if they're not ready, they're not ready. But for those that are ready and understand, like, look, I have a drinking problem. I'm using alcohol or drugs to mute the pain, but now I don't feel anything else for anything else. Or, I'm isolating at home because I don't want to go out in public, or like, there's help out there. And I'm not going to say you need to do this or do that, because what works for me might not work for you. There's tons of techniques. There's tons of different group therapy, individual therapy, meditation. There's all these different things, and there's all these resources. But you have to take a proactive approach of it. Like you might have to go to 2 or 3 different ways of doing something before you find what works for you.
I like that.
Or you're going to take one piece from each thing you've done and you're going to incorporate it. So if you look at it like leadership, you're a combination of your good leaders and bad leaders. You learn from your good leaders on what to do, and you learn from your bad leaders on what not to do.
Totally.
Therapy is the same way. Like, this doesn't work for me, I'm not going to use it, but this worked for me. And this part worked for me, and this part worked for me. And then you can create your own style.
I love that. I like that. I've never heard that. I like that. No matter what the experience you try, you're going to gain something from it.
Right.
Whether it's the knowledge that it doesn't work for you.
Right.
That is still something gained. Oh, I like that. And then you can just continue on that journey.
Right. And now you have that knowledge that down the road, if somebody else is struggling, you can say, it might not have worked for me, but it might have worked for you.
And give them kind of a foresight of what it looks like. Oh, I like that a lot. Okay, so sometimes, this is something that you do. Sometimes you weave humor in.
No.
Shocking, right? You?
Right.
Especially when speaking about your injuries. And it's to put the other person at ease. And I've seen you done this time and time again. And so what advice would you give to someone who comes across a severely wounded individual who has physical wounds, whether it's prosthetics, burns, you name it? Like, what advice would you give to that person?
Be a child again. Seriously, like, I love kids because they have no filter.
They don't.
Right? I've had them come out to me like, why do you have hooks? Or tell me about this. Or why do you have no ears? Like, I love that, because that curiosity. So it used to bother me early in my recovery, people would stare. And now people stare, I just don't notice it. I understand that they're not staring to be rude.
No,
they're staring out of curiosity. So kids will stare, but then they'll ask the question. So I tell, and be a kid again. Just go up and ask. If you're curious, like, you want to know how the prosthetic works, ask. You want to know how I got burned, ask. And I understand for the veteran who has those injuries, that's a kind of a burden sometimes to always have to answer them. But you're, like, when I travel, like, I may be the only burn double hand amputee that person or that community ever sees. So I got to take that opportunity to educate them. So ask the question, find out, go talk to them. They would rather you ask the question than just stare.
Oh, okay. So 14 years is a long time of serving in the military. And as you reflect back on it all and the path that led to you post-injury, was there any key takeaway about leadership or resilience or teamwork that kind of stands out to you the most?
Man, it's so tough.
That's a big one, I know.
Because you continually grow, right? And so I think back when I was a young sergeant, man, was I a toxic leader. I mean,
Really?
straight up toxic. I'm like, I feel for those guys who were underneath me
Get
when I was a
out.
young
No, I
sergeant.
don't think it would have
Oh,
been that
100%. I mean, I can tell you 100% those guys, one, they hated me, they feared me. Like, I can tell you them coming to work was probably not a pleasant experience for them because I ruled with an iron fist. That was my early leadership style. And part of it's, when I came in the service, the leaders that, I had, a misconception of what leadership was. And so I can say, like, I wish I would have been a better leader sooner. But it took other leaders saying, hey, like, why are you so mad? Like, why are you so angry? Like, why aren't, and it hit me to where, like, okay, I don't always have to yell. I don't always have to be this kind of gruff figure, and so it got to a point by the time, like, I was deploying, my guys knew if I was yelling, it was bad.
Got it.
Because then they knew they messed up. Because normally I didn't have to attack it that way. And some of the greatest leaders I've served under, their calm and collective manner and the way they approach it was way worse than if they would have just been screaming.
Oh.
And so I learned that, and so leadership constantly develops. And I think even post-injury, it still can, it's something I'm still learning. So I think the takeaway is, I mean, obviously, even within recovery, having a team, having that support network around you, realizing you can't do certain things on your own, to take care of the people around you because they can take care of you. Those are all great things, but never stop progressing. Always learn something, always take something from it. Always be observant of the people around you to see what you can take away from it.
Always learning.
Yep.
Yeah. What was it like to receive a specially adapted smart technology home from the Gary Sinise Foundation?
Oh, man, like, can you even put that into words, really? Like, I mean, I still remember when Gary called me and told me that I was going to get one of the homes, and I actually said no.
Get out.
Flat out, I was like, nope. And he's like, what? I'm like,
what?
Yeah, I think that'd be the response. But I'm like, in my mind, there's always somebody who's more injured. There's always somebody who could use it a little bit more. And he's like, well, I need you to think about it. I'm like, all right, well, I'll talk to Mom about it. We'll have the discussion. And I mean, obviously, ultimately, I said yes. But I just, I was like, am I really deserving of that? And
of course.
There is, but I look around and I just see how many people could use one of those homes to make their life easier, and it really did it. The thing it did is give me a little bit more of my independence back, but more so it allowed Mom to get some of her independence back. The more I could do, the less she had to do, and she could start taking care of herself again, or she could go do some of her quilts or crafts or whatever this she does over there. I love Mom to death, but I don't care for crafts. I can't relate. But the fact that she could go do those things was important to me. So it completely changed our lives for the better. And again, having the ability to do more stuff for yourself is always going to be beneficial. So going back real quick to when I talked about suicide, it's because I didn't have the light at the end of the tunnel. I couldn't feed myself, couldn't dress myself. And I can remember the very first day I got my first prosthetic, my temporary, and I only got the right one initially because this arm was still being worked on. But I went home and fed myself for the first time that very first night I had it.
And
getting
how long?
To feed myself. So just shy of a year and a half after our injury. So a year and a half I stayed in that constant need for somebody else.
You've never fed yourself for a year.
Right. So that little bit of like, okay, if I can do that, what else can I do?
Yeah.
Right? Well, the home is the same thing. You're not going to be able to do everything day one, but okay, if I can do this today, then what can I do tomorrow? And so that's huge.
It just like opens your aperture up. Oh, I love that. One of my fondest memories is, and there's plenty, is when we got to go and visit you in your home after you had been there for a little while, you and your mom.
Yeah.
And so Gary wanted to come by and check it out and just to hear from you personally,
Right.
his friend, what it was like, what impact it made. So what was it like touring Gary Sinise in your home?
That was all right. I mean, it was okay. But what I really remember is there was this little itty bitty baby, brand new Marine who was with them,
I was so green. It was like 10 years ago.
This little fresh face, new, executive assistant with them. Like, who is this? Because that was like one of our very first meetings too for us.
Yeah, it was.
So I think back to that too. So that was great. So I have double meaning there.
I love that.
No, it was great having Gary there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I understand that, he can't make all the home dedications. And I think his reasoning is he doesn't want to take, the attention off the veteran, which is great.
Exactly.
But then to have that personal time with them, and get to see the nooks and crannies. And he's seen it for the first time outside of photos.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a special moment,
Yeah.
And then for me, like having mom's side of it, I let mom let her take her little tour of her side of the house. And
it was great.
so it was fun.
Yeah, it was so much fun. And then seeing your gym and all the mechanics of everything and how you were just so fully functional. It was beautiful.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun. Okay, so what is your favorite program of the Gary Sinise Foundation?
I'm torn.
Mm-hmm.
There's two.
Okay.
And both have special meaning for me, but it would have to be Soaring Valor and Snowball Express, because
100%.
Obviously we're losing our World War II veterans at an alarming rate now.
Mm-hmm.
They're getting up there in age. We don't have many left. So every opportunity that we can take to spend time with them is important.
Absolutely.
To hear their stories, because pretty soon all we're going to have is the museum.
Mm-hmm.
So that one is always going to be very close to my heart. But having lost guys in combat, having personal friends who were killed in combat, guys I served with earlier in my career that later were killed, the Gold Star families are so close, and I include, I like that in Snowball. We also Families of the Fallen because of, again, suicide.
Oh, yeah.
and taking the families that, the veteran couldn't get past their demons. So seeing those kids, knowing what those kids are having to grow up without having their parent around, having that spouse who has to, be a single parent again. I think we need to take that special time for them.
Oh, yeah. I will tell you, one of my favorite noises during our annual event in Disney is your giggles with the kids. I look forward to it every single year. It's like one of those core memories in my head. It's just the sound of you giggling, and the kids giggle so hard with you. And so what do you think it is that draws them to you?
So it's so funny, because I really didn't know, but not this year, but the year prior when we had done the first responder families for the first time. I find that the military children obviously take to me much faster than the first responder families.
Okay.
I think within the military, most kids now know somebody who's missing a limb, know somebody who has shrapnel, or know somebody through their small network of family.
Right.
So I think they're used to seeing something
Yeah.
that's different. And so that curiosity will draw them like, okay, now what happened to you? And eventually the first responder kids will too, after I get playing with them and everything and put them at ease. So I don't know. It could be curiosity. They want to obviously know how the prosthetics work, how does it spin.
You like magic tricks.
Yeah, that's right. And then obviously now, having done it for so many years, and also doing the TAPS event out in DC, where I get to see a lot of those same families over Memorial Day, I've watched these kids grow up.
Oh, yeah. These are like your babies.
Oh, yeah. And I have several I stay in touch with throughout the year. I get photos, I get school pictures. And so if there is a child who might not be as comfortable coming up to me for whatever reason, seeing me with the other kids, they're like, oh, okay, this guy might be all right. And then they come over eventually too.
You have such a heart for serving others. So can you share what you're doing now?
So now it's so funny because, I met Chef Robert Irvine through Gary and a lot of the partnership programs with Gary Sinise Foundation. So I think I met him initially back in 2011. So I've known him for a very long time.
He was
too.
early starting the tweet that sparked the friendship.
And I think I was at the very first Invincible Spirit Festival when we did it at Walter Reed, and with the cooking and the band and everything. So, I've had that relationship with him, and he started his foundation in 2014. So now they just recently brought me in to run the outreach.
Oh, I love
so that. It reminds me of the early days of GSF. So there's a lot of correlation.
Oh yeah.
Hey,
we're one family. We've got one mission. We're all doing all that we can.
We were just in San Diego.
Yep.
For another Invincible Spirit Festival at the Naval Hospital. And it was great because, I got to see a lot of my GSF family, but I was also there doing my stuff with Robert.
I love that.
It's kind of the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
There is a lot of intermix there. Mm-hmm. But this is the fun part, is when you get to grow the foundation and do stuff. So again, it reminds me of the early years of being with GSF, and I'm excited about this new role.
Oh, so it's exciting to watch all that you're doing. So, well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Mike. And you are such a dear friend and an incredible inspiration to not only me, but so many, and Gary and Mac. And I know that Mac is smiling down knowing that you're on the podcast. And it just makes me so happy. So
it makes me happier.
Yeah. And as we do with every episode, Mac, close up the show.
You've been listening to GSF Podcast, the official podcast of the Gary Sinise Foundation. If you'd like to find out more about what the foundation is up to, or if you'd like to make a donation, please visit GarySiniseFoundation.org. Make sure to tune in next time for more interviews, and thanks for joining us.